It's a new material.
New procedure.
New procedure.
New precursor? It may or may not change. The temperature is usually more dependent on what the substrate can tolerate, more so than what the precursor can do. This is heating with the reactor in the system. Precursor heating by itself is just one of the heaters, if you wanted to heat it.
So what I can perceive is that for this heating recipe, as long as you are using the same substrate, it's almost the same. You don't need to change it for heating recipe.
Yeah, as long as the heat, for in this case, as long as your substrate can handle 300 degrees, 330 degrees, you can run it.
I understand. Regardless of the material you are putting. But just based on
It may matter, because you don't want to have your reactor and your line so hot and you're going to decompose the precursor material before it gets to the substrate. So you may be running a precursor that requires these temperatures to be a little bit lower. Not always. Sometimes.
Maybe ask you this question. So right now, the silicon wafer is at 330 degrees Celsius, right? Because it's that the wafer can handle that. What if we're going at a lower temperature? How would that?
If you run it at a lower temperature, then your growth per cycle will change, it will shift a little bit. And the possibility of having, if everything's heated, you don't have the condensation. But you might have to add a little bit more time to your purge to clear out the material.
So the reason you have 330 degrees is for the growth rate or deposition rate to be optimal for this material.
That's what's optimum. There's a whole lot of history on aluminum oxide at that temperature. We know exactly what we should be getting at that temperature. So that's the reason why the parameter.
So in other words, that if we're going to deposit new material on a silicon wafer, we have no idea what temperature will be good for that. So we pretty much can start with this temperature and see how it grows. And then
I wouldn't do that. I would get in contact with myself or Nolan Bruce, say, I've seen a technical paper, I've seen a slide paper on a material. Can we run it on this tool? And if we do, what parameters or what process do we need to change to be able to do that? You have 30 years of knowledge available to you. Why would you want to reinvent the wheel? Just ask it. This way, you don't spend $2,000 on a precursor and end up ruining it on the learning curve. Just ask. Chances are, we've already have had that recipe, have an idea of where to run that recipe, or at least are aware that there's maybe a new precursor that came about. I would not try to learn that on your own. And this is something I would tell everybody, not just you guys. Why? You have the resource of a resource scientist that's all he does, he lives for it. Actually two now, because we have two research scientists up at Penn State. That's what they do. Bruce designed it, Tom runs the experiments, and that's how we're built right now. So yeah, if the resource is there, use it, absolutely. Just ask them. I wonder, can we, and sometimes you might not be able to run something. We would tell you that too. But if you can do it, and sometimes customers say, well, I want to run this material. We don't have any recipes, we don't have any experience with it. We'll give you some benchmarks. So it's an advantage to us to work in a collaboration with universities and other users, because this way the learning curve is very steep, the chance of success is a little bit greater. you utilize our resources, and we work with you, so we have a little bit better idea of what's happening. It's a win-win situation for everybody. And then there's universities that we have a collaboration agreement with for just running experiments to work with, to use our resource, our knowledge, and we get information from their experiments.
So those you were talking about, is that something we have to pay for contract, service contract, or is it something that?
That's different from a service contract. So, that type of collaboration is for research. It's not like something you have to sign up so you have access to a library of information.
Yeah, because my question is, let's say 1 year later, we have some question, have some new things we don't know, we reach out to you. Is that
Send an email.
we don't need any service contract for you to provide information?
No, we don't work like that. We spend a lot of time with the customers, and a lot of that cost that falls on the company. Some companies are like, well, you have to have a contract to talk to us, after whatever period of time. With the ALD group, different from the PVD, with the ALD group, we have a vested interest in the success that you're running. Because if you just go wing it and run the system in a way that's going to damage the system without being aware of it, now the system don't work. Whenever that happens, customers say, well, your system's broke. Then we have to dig into it and find out maybe it was something that the customer was doing that they weren't aware of. So it's advantageous for us to work with the customer for their success. So this way you can run it and say, well, you run it the way you thought would, maybe that'll damage the valve in a way that you weren't even aware of. Now, not only did you kill the precursor, you killed the valve. You're out $4,000. Or, worse yet, maybe you damage the system and the lead time for the parts now 36 weeks. You don't want that either. Just work with it. The Kurt Lester company is really good at that in general. The ALD group is very good at that. But there may be sometimes, I come down to this area a couple of times a year. So if I'm have a short visit or install someplace else, I might just say, hey, I'm going to be in the area. And I'll probably do this because you guys are just learning this. In 6 months or a year, if I'm coming through here, I'll say, you want me to stop by and answer any questions? Because you won't have all the questions
Right now.
yet. The more you use it, the more questions will pop up. I try to pull out as many questions as I can while I'm here, but it's not going to be all of them. But yeah, the company, and especially the ALD group, it doesn't work like, okay, the system's signed off, you're done. Okay, we're not talking to you unless you pay more money. The company isn't like that. It's very good. And the amount of time that I spend personally with customers after the sale is many hours. But it works. And it's a good relation with the customer, because whenever you want to have an upgrade or you want to put an oven in, it may cost $10,000 or $20,000, then you have some degree of confidence there's a relationship. This is going to work. It's just better in the long run. It pays dividends. Sometimes it's a little bit costly up front. I know you guys are new at both of these, and you're going to have a lot of questions. The more we can help you understand, the better you're going to be at running the tools, the better your results are going to be. Then you understand the capabilities and limitations. Now you can start to design your own stuff as you work for funding. You can say, yeah, I can do this, or yeah, you can't do that. And it helps funding, especially with the university, helping funding, helps buy upgrades and tools. So it's just better long term.
We actually had a lot of people from outside visit the lab, for the past couple of months. So, every time they come here, they say, your name, your brand, it's other building MFC.
That happens a lot of times with grad students and stuff. They'll move on and they'll go to other companies or other universities or whatever. And sometimes, depending on the contract, they'll take the tool with them.
Yeah.
It depends on what the contract is with the university. We had one gentleman that took the tool to 2 universities, and he's moving to another university, and he had the option to take the tool with him. But the university worked out something, they're going to buy the tool. He went to this new university, and he's going to buy a new tool.
That's good for the business model. I like it.
Yeah, it's worked on. It really nice. The MFC setup and the maintenance screen, you could set it to run different gases. You're going to only run argon or nitrogen, so you can change it here.
So right now, first one, all argon. That's awesome.
Yep. The only place you run nitrogen at all is right in the 4 line here. Process uses all argon. System logbook, you can look in the manual for this. I don't think it's totally incorporated yet. UI configuration. This is a button. This is where you can manipulate the button. So it has the navigation buttons. The navigation buttons are here.
Oh, I don't even need it. It's too much.
You don't have to do any of this because it all looks the same. If you're just using admin, but this is where maybe I was having a user, I didn't want them to see this, then you can come in and create a new configuration, and then you can change what can be seen on different buttons. So this is the button configuration is where you can go ahead and change how the screen looks and what operation. So you have create user where you can limit some of their operations. This is what they can see and not see. You can also, in this is default because that's the only button configuration it has. You have the recipes here that are pushed on this side. So the command, the very most common recipes, you can just have them hitting a button here. So if you have an experiment you're going to run 40 times for like a design of experiments or something like that, you might not want to have somebody come in and running the recipes where you have variables. You want to just simple, run this recipe, run this recipe. So in that case, you can have a recipe as a button. They're just hitting the same thing all the time. So this is where you create that. So you could say what the button name is, that could be anything. And then what the recipe is. This is space and case sensitive. So you could have, say, the button name sample recipe. And then the recipe itself, I would click on the recipe and copy the name and paste it in here. This way you don't have any case or space problems. And the manual covers these pretty decently. Configure values, you won't use that. Source tabs. Software sets this up, you won't be here. Signal editor, you won't be here either. Software sets it up. Recipe operation, software sets that up. So you won't have to worry about that. Operation, this is where you're going to be at almost all the time. Maintenance, you may be here for troubleshooting, and you may get in the heater setup. The heater setup also has a tab that says error setup. This is set up in a factory, so if there's, it'll monitor both thermocouples, and if one drifts too far out, it'll cause that error. So some of this is where errors are. If we're working with you over the recipe, if anything needs to be tweaked here, we'll go ahead and set it up that way. You won't be here with that. Really shouldn't be here unless, we're working with you. This host utility down here on the toolbar. This drops down on the toolbar anytime you launch the software. You can't close it. It actually works in conjunction. On here, there's a Cheats tab that you should be aware of. And there's editors such as Calm. You can sometimes, whenever you boot up the communication, might not be 100%. We can come in and say, well, hit Calm and save and exit. And it re-inputs that to the computer.
So when you open the software, this will not work?
It should. Sometimes we have a little glitch
Okay.
that comes up.
How do you tell it is
For example, if you have an analog input that isn't responding like it normally should, everything else is working step one. Yes. For now, just be aware of it. If we end up doing any troubleshooting remotely, you might see somebody come into the host controller and then change something here. Just so you're aware, the disk gets nested in the back. Cheats tab is the only area where anybody would be doing anything. If there's things that need to be changed to editing, you're going to see us do it remotely anyway. The more you see that operation, the more you're going to understand and be familiar with it. Takeaway just right now is just, be aware of it. So that covers the screen, the buttons down here. I'm going to go ahead and acknowledge this right now. So what's next is getting into the recipe editor.
I assume you already checked the sample.
Nope.
Okay. You don't know whether it was deposited.
Let's deposit it.
Okay.
So if you want to, you can, let's take a break, like 10 minutes.
Yeah, sure.